Well, hey folks, it's your old pal King Waspinator. Welcome back to Total Party Skills. I was debating whether or not I even wanted to do a video talking about my thoughts on this, but I just noticed Legion of Myth was doing a live stream on the subject of gatekeeping, and I popped in there just barely long enough to see that they were talking about how to convince people to play human characters instead of elves and stuff. That's an easy question to that one, guys. Don't run games that have things available for people to play that you don't want them playing. Even if you're playing a game like Dungeons and Dragons that normally would make stuff like elves available, all you have to do is just say no, they're not available. Here's a list of what you can play in this campaign. The end. Or just run a game where that's just a non-issue. You play Lion and Dragon. That's a D&D style D20 game. That's all human characters. Bam! You've just convinced all your players to play human characters, and now you don't have to worry about them not being alien enough to be elves. I get it. On some level, on another level, I feel that some of this attitude that's starting to crop up on at least one side of the gaming spectrum, kind of as an oppositional reaction to the other end of the gaming spectrum. Guys, don't just allow yourself to be reflexively chased into a corner just because somebody else is doing something you don't like. Don't allow that to force that to make you change your beliefs or alter your positioning. It's another way of kind of letting them win, because you're kind of still allowing their actions to box you in and define you to some degree or not, even if you're trying to get your backbone up behind it and act like you're doing this because you want to. In the same way that a cat that does something embarrassing will give you that look as if, oh, I intended to do that the whole time, even though you know that's not necessarily the truth. A couple of days ago, I saw a comment on one of my older videos, not super old, but the Volo's Guide to Social Justice video, which actually might be my most viewed video on this channel at this point. I'd have to do a little double checking on that, but it's definitely up there. And probably the source of a good chunk of several of you who are subscribed come through that channel. Anyway, someone left a comment. It was a pretty good comment. Thoughtful, had a little story to tell. It was about a fella who has been trying to teach his daughters to play Dungeons and Dragons, ages 8 and 11. The 11-year-old wanted to play a fire genasi. The 8-year-old decides he wants to play a water genasi. He tells them that water genasi and fire genasi wouldn't hang out because they're opposing elements, and he's got all this reasoning for it that fits with a canonical vision of a Dungeons and Dragons world, certainly. But this caused the younger daughter to pitch a fit and throw a tantrum. That ended up being resolved by the mom having to step in and say, look, you're not going to be allowed to play D&D at all for a while if you don't play by the rules. From a parenting perspective, separating because there's a couple different things going on in that little tale, and I'm just summarizing it, obviously. From a parenting point of view, as soon as the kid throws a tantrum, your hands are kind of tied, and so sticking to your guns and not creating the illusion that somehow she's going to be getting her way by having thrown a fit. That's good parenting. I also find it admirable that the mom came in and supported her husband instead of undermining him by taking the kid's side. That's all groovy. I had counter asked. I was just kind of curious exactly what the daughter's specific sticking point was, though. Was it that he was telling her that she couldn't play a water genasi because her sister was playing a fire genasi, or was she assuming she couldn't play a water genasi because her racial instinct would cause her to not be naturally friends with a fire genasi kind of a thing? Which to me makes a big difference, because he did say that he had told them that they can play any race they want, and then she says, okay, I want to play this race, and then he tells her, no, you can't, because your older sibling already made a decision that blocks your decision, even though your decision is entirely cued off the older sibling's decision. I'm not surprised to hear that they had some sort of emotional reaction to that. An 8-year-old kid probably isn't going to be able to really articulate what that whole kind of scene is in terms of like what kind of feelings that would make you have. You're an 8-year-old kid. You're excited to play this thing. Daddy's been sazzing it up, getting you excited to want to play it, telling you about it and all the possibilities and how much fun's it going to be. Maybe telling you some of his own personal memories from back when he was your age, all that kind of shit. You live in an environment where like stuff like Avatar, The Last Airbender is a big hot property and all that kind of stuff. You're told that you can play any race that you want, and then you're immediately told that no, you made the wrong decision. That's kind of like that's giving the kid a paradox to resolve, and that's not necessarily fair to them. It means that on some level you're not being entirely honest with them by saying that they could play anything they want. They could play anything they want within certain limitations, depending on what the other person chooses. However, just on a basic level, I mean, yes, like psychologically, as a profile thing, no, a water genasi and a fire genasi would not naturally be inclined to be buddy-buddy. Fine. Odd couple type pairings are like found throughout action and adventure storytelling. Riggs, Murtaugh, Legolas, and Gimlis. We have, the classic buddy cop kind of scenario, good cop, bad cop. They're being brought together reluctantly to have to go do a thing that forces them over time to learn to like each other and get along and all that kind of stuff. I feel what was lost there was kind of just like a learning opportunity for some creativity. Either for the kids to have to sit there and come up with a backstory reason as to why they are teamed up, or God forbid their dad actually have to come up with some sort of plot reason that would explain why they were both hooked together and going on this adventure. No, I got some weird by the book interpretation of exactly how magical half genies from Dimension X are going to operate. Like I said, on a parenting level, the guy did the right thing. His hands are tied. But I kind of feel like I'm slightly more on the daughter's side on this one, guys. Also, 8-year-old, like the level of expectations that you should have for someone who's playing in your game that's a teenager should be different from the sort of expectations that you have for a player who's in their 20s. That it should be different for your expectations of someone who's 30 plus, and certainly someone who's under the age of 10, who's trying to play one of these games. You're not going to be able to they're not going to be operating, at the same level that you were running your games in college, kind of a thing. That's putting a level of expectation on them that might be a little bit too stringent. I get that you're trying to teach them how to play D&D quote unquote right. But, that whatever makes D&D right is very nebulous because, each and every individual game master kind of puts their own thumbprint on what they're doing. And, eventually if she does stick with the hobby, she will find, discovering other people running other games, that not everyone's necessarily going to, put those sorts of creative controls on her and what kind of choices she makes. So I don't know. In the long term, I'm not really sure if you really this is a hill you just won or not. Also, the fact that she threw a tantrum over that's probably a sign that she's too young. I've seen several comments over the last year plus, not just on my videos, but just on the internet in general, things people have been saying of just various older DMs trying to teach D&D and other games to their kids. And especially during the pandemic years. I mean, a lot of us are kind of extra limited on who we're able to gather together and have access to be players on a regular basis. But I feel some people, are really excited at the idea that they get to teach role-playing games to their kids, and they're just not waiting long enough. The fact that a lot of these products are ages 12 and up isn't just done entirely for arbitrary reasons. The fact that she would have an emotional tantrum over having her choice thwarted is probably a sign that, like, yeah, is she gonna handle, like, having, what if she has a bunch of bad dice rolls in a row, or what if her character gets killed? Like, it just might be an indication that she's too young. And like, I know you want to do the thing, but sometimes you just gotta wait. You could, like, potentially ruin the whole experience with her. Also, the idea of the threat of punishment by entertainment genre removal, it's an easy way to threaten a kid that's very, like, it's not at all physically abusive, and it doesn't seem like it's even psychologically abusive. There are certain age ranges, though, where being cut off from whole swaths of pop culture can actually have an effect on your development and your ability to, like, relate to other people your age and all that kind of stuff, and can influence your interests as you grow older. So I wouldn't be so casual about stuff like, I'm going to take all your music away, or I'm going to take away all your television, or you're not allowed to play D&D, or any of those sorts of things. As a soft threat, sure, but if there's actual real intention to carry through on that, I'm not really sure how I feel about that. Once again, I'm probably slightly more on the girl's side. Also, my thing at the beginning of, like, how you keep people from playing elves wrong? You don't let them play elves. You know how, you encourage your players to play human characters? Then only allow them to play human characters. Genasi are not in the basic player's handbook. They're not even in any of the side rule books. They're not in Mordenkainen's Tome. They're not in Volo's Guide to Monsters. Either you have that little cheap Elemental Evil Player's Handbook thing from the early days of 5th edition, or you have a copy of the Princes of the Apocalypse Adventure module. In either case, you had to go a little bit out of your way to present Genasi as an option to these kids, and then they took them, and you, like, immediately, like, said no, basically. Was there any of the discussion to, like, what about being a slightly different element of Genasi? Does the older sister budge at all on her decisions? Would you have allowed them to play an elf and a dwarf hanging out? What about a tiefling and an Aasimar? A high elf and a drow. There's lots of pairings in D&D that are unnatural. As I say frequently in quite a few of my videos, whether or not Gary Gygax and his cohorts were intending so or not, the very nature of D&D being a game where you're playing a bunch of different people from different races, some of which don't like each other, but are coming together to fight for the common good, being, like, very in a similar to Star Trek way, that that's the kind of message that D&D ends up kind of promoting in play because of what the players are doing. So, like Fire Genasi and Water Genasi teaming up to go save the world, I don't find that bothersome. And like I said, we got to be careful not to be, like, chased into a corner that we don't actually really want to be in because the guys on the other side of the fence are acting the way they're acting. Like, it's harder and braver to hold your position. Being a gatekeeper is great, but part of the job of the gatekeeper is letting people in the city. It's not just keeping people out. It's showing discretion as to, like, who can slip through. But part of being able to show discretion means that you have to be able to be reasonable. And if only the kid had been old enough to have better express, like, whatever it was that was bothering her, and so that she didn't, just come at it as just throwing a fit, and could have possibly have, like, reasoned out some sort of compromise that could have made all parties happy. But unfortunately, as I said, like, as soon as the kid pops a tantrum, the dad's hands are a little bit tied. You really, it's not good to, appease kids throwing tantrums by giving into what they want, because it teaches them that throwing tantrums is a way to get what they want. And I mean, how much of our complaints about, the current state of gaming is because of a generation of kids who are already raised up without being told no enough, and that sort of thing. Albeit that's itself kind of a gross stereotype about millennials and Zoomers that not all of them are afflicted by. So, I don't know, like in concept, the idea of a fire elemental and a water elemental teaming up and use like that's great coverage of powers without very much in the way overlap. But like it gives you a pretty good spread of capabilities. The fact that they can neutralize each other or be in conflict with each other from time to time, that's all great role playing game fodder. And I just can't help but notice that when he responded back, he didn't answer my question as to exactly what her sticking point was. It was just more stuff justifying his reasoning. So that makes it seem to me like he did do the thing where he told her that she could play anything she want, and then she chose something, and then he told her, no, you can't do that. Can you really blame her for being pissed? I don't know. Stay waspinated.